Are you sure it was you who decided to distance yourself from this person? Because looking closely, it seems more like a retreat than a decision. One day you were there, fully committed, present, and the next, there was a distance that no one announced, no one explained, and that you yourself can't pinpoint exactly when it started. Taurus likes to tell this story as if it were a conscious choice. I got tired. I realized things. I needed to protect myself. But there's a more unsettling version behind this clean version, a version that involves an ancient, almost animalistic mechanism that decides to close doors long before any thought is formed. Because this person, specifically this one, may not have done anything wrong. Perhaps they just got too close to a place you've kept hidden for years, even from yourself. A place where a wound resides that has nothing to do with abandonment in the obvious way everyone expects, but with instability, with the ground that has trembled before and left a mark that the body has never forgotten. What if the distancing wasn't about protecting you from her, but about protecting an old part of yourself from something that happened long before she existed in your life? That question changes everything, because it takes the blame off her and sheds light on a mechanism you never had a chance to examine closely until now. It's not about going back, it's about understanding what this earth that you are decided to protect in silence, without consulting you, and why it chose precisely this person to draw the sap in and close the door. The answer may not be what you expected. You've probably heard that Taurus is the sign of loyalty, of I don't give up on those I love. That's true, to a certain extent. But there's a deeper loyalty, one that no one taught you to name. The loyalty Taurus has first and foremost to its own emotional survival. Before being loyal to another, Taurus is loyal to the ground that sustains it. And when that ground begins to tremble, when the sense of security you build with such care begins to crack, something inside you flips a switch that doesn't even have a name. It's not anger. It's not open resentment. It's a withdrawal, a silent retreat from everything that was fertile. There's a logic to this that no one has explained, because it doesn't come from conscious thought. It comes from an older mechanism. Think of a tree that senses winter coming before any leaves fall. It doesn't warn you. It doesn't argue with the wind. It simply begins to draw sap inward to protect what is essential and lets the rest dry out without a fuss. That's what you did to this person. You felt winter coming in a relationship, in a friendship, in a shared experience, even before you could explain what you were feeling, and your body made the decision before your mind admitted it. And here lies the first real discomfort. If it was an automatic mechanism, then to what extent were you choosing to distance yourself, and to what extent was something older, deeply ingrained, choosing for you? Because there's a pattern that repeats itself, isn't there? It wasn't just with this person. If you're honest now, at this very moment, you'll recognize that you've done this before in other relationships, at other times in your life, always with the same silent choreography, deep closeness, genuine surrender. And then, when something touches a point you didn't even know existed, the retreat. The question no one has asked yet is the important one. What exactly does this sensitive spot protect? Because ground that closes up like that, without warning, usually holds something that has been hurt before, perhaps in another relationship, in a time so distant that you don't even remember where the first crack came from. And it is precisely there, in that territory you never visited on purpose, that the answer lies for why you distanced yourself from that person, not for lack of love, but for an excess of care for a part of yourself that no one ever properly protected. And perhaps that's exactly why this question haunts you to this day, even after so much time, even after so many explanations you've tried to give yourself. It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose isn't about winning back someone who's gone, nor about mending what's already cracked. It's about something more essential for Taurus: how to recognize, without guilt, the moments when you retreat to protect yourself, and how to differentiate that from a retreat that only distances you from your own abundance. It's about building a security that doesn't depend on constantly guarding the territory, a solidity that comes from within and doesn't need to close itself off to exist. If you've made it this far, it's because something in this story struck a chord you hadn't yet named, and now is the right time to confront it head-on while it's still alive, while it still hurts a little. Not in a month when your mind has already rewritten the story in a more comfortable way. The link is in the first pinned comment, but be aware, this content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. In the comments, I want to know, is there a specific person you've drifted apart from and still can't explain exactly why? Notice something. You're not alone with this one person. If you calmly look back in your memory, you'll find more than one name on that same silent list. People you truly loved, people who were part of important phases of your life, and who one day, without any fuss, simply ceased to be part of your life. There was no announced separation. There was a gradual, almost geological distancing, the kind you only notice when it's already done. And this isn't a coincidence. Nor is it bad luck in the relationships you choose. This is a pattern. And patterns, unlike accidents, have roots. The root of this pattern is usually not in the person you distanced yourself from. It lies in an earlier, more distant moment where you learned, perhaps without words, perhaps as a child, perhaps in a phase of adulthood when you let your guard down too much once, that giving up too much space is costly, that handing over the key to your own security to another person is risky. And the body, this earthy, practical body, decided to keep a backup copy of that key. A part of you that never, under any circumstances, gives everything away, that always maintains a reserve, a piece of land that is only yours, untouchable, hidden even from those you love most. This explains the distancing better than any fight could. Because when that person, unintentionally, through no fault of their own, got too close to that hidden reserve, something in you recognized the ancient danger even before any conscious thought formed. And the retreat began, slowly, without drama, the way Taurus always does the most important things, silently, without asking permission from anyone, not even yourself. Imagine a house you've carefully built over the years. Each brick is proof that you've learned to fend for yourself, that you don't need to depend on anyone to survive. Now imagine someone entering that house and asking to see the room you've kept locked for years, the one where you store evidence that once you couldn't manage on your own. No matter how well-intentioned the question is, the mere fact that someone approaches that door is enough to put the entire house's security system on alert. And Taurus, the homeowner, doesn't yell, doesn't forcibly expel the visitor. He simply begins to avoid that room so naturally that over time he avoids the very person who asked. What if that's really the case? What if the estrangement wasn't because that person did something wrong, but because they got too close to a wound that already existed before they even came into your life? This question is unsettling because it takes the other person out of the center of the story and puts you in it. And nobody likes to look in that direction, because looking inward like that hurts more than continuing to blame the other person or blaming the circumstances. I know that this kind of recognition weighs heavily because that's exactly what made me dig deeper. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign towards a life of purpose has an entire section dedicated to these patterns that repeat themselves without you realizing it, showing how Taurus can learn to distinguish a real danger from an old wound that is only being reopened. It's not about never retreating again. It's about retreating by choice, not by automatic reflex that pushes you away, even from those who deserve to stay. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. There's something no one told you about that old wound. It rarely has to do with abandonment, in the obvious way that self-help books describe. For Taurus, the deepest wound is almost always about instability, about the ground shifting when they least expected it. It could have been a sudden change in childhood, a financial loss, a broken promise, at a time when trust was still being formed. The size of the event doesn't matter. What matters is the size of the mark it left on how you learned, from an early age, to calculate risk in any relationship. And the most curious thing is that you weren't even consciously aware that you were calculating. Taurus rarely does this kind of calculation in their head, coldly. They feel it in their body. A tightness in the chest when someone gets too close too quickly. A sudden urge to change the subject when the conversation gets too deep. A tiredness that appears out of nowhere, just when intimacy was about to reach a level never before experienced with that person. These are the signals the body sends before the mind admits anything. And the most ironic thing is that, most of the time, these people you distance yourself from haven't done anything wrong. They just arrived at their own pace, which happened to be faster than your internal security system could process. It's not about blame on either side. It's about two different internal clocks, one that trusts quickly and another that needs to confirm, test, feel the ground before taking any bigger step. When these two clocks can't adjust in time, the slower clock will most likely simply stop ticking, not because it consciously decided to, but because the body, tired of so much alertness, prefers the familiar silence to the uncertainty of continuing to try. If you pay attention now, you might be able to remember exactly when this happened with the person you distanced yourself from. It wasn't during a major fight. It was in a small, almost silly moment where they got too close to something you didn't even know you were hiding. It might have been a simple question, asked without ulterior motive, like, "What if we lived together?" Or, "Tell me something you've never told anyone." It might have been a shared silence that lasted too long to be comfortable. One of those silences where you can hear your own thoughts too loudly. It might even have been a genuine gesture of care made at the wrong time, which instead of calming, triggered an old alarm that had nothing to do with that person specifically. The body doesn't distinguish well between current danger and past danger. It only senses the pattern repeating itself and presses the button it knows how to press. Retreat, protect, close. And here's the paradox no one prepared you to face. The same solidity that makes Taurus reliable, present, loyal to the core, is the same solidity that, when threatened, transforms into a wall that not even Taurus himself can climb back up. You build security to feel free, but sometimes that same security becomes a cage. And worse, you lock the door from the inside and even pretend to yourself that the key is missing. This is the moment when protection stops protecting and starts to cost. It costs bonds. It costs opportunities for real intimacy. It costs the chance to let someone prove over time that that old fear doesn't need to repeat itself forever. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign towards a life of purpose deals precisely with this turning point, the moment when security becomes a prison, and offers a practical path for Taurus to recognize when they are truly protecting and when they are merely running away, disguised as wisdom. It's about rebuilding the ability to let someone in without feeling like they are losing their own footing. Access may be terminated at any time, so don't delay. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. Now look at that person you distanced yourself from with different eyes, just for a moment. There's a chance, just a chance, that they weren't the problem, that they were, unintentionally, a mirror. Someone who, without knowing it, got close enough to your hidden reserve to force you to feel something you'd been avoiding for years. And maybe that's why distancing yourself from them still weighs differently than the others, because they didn't hurt you. They showed you. It's uncomfortable to admit because it's much easier to live with the version where the other person did something wrong. It's simpler that way, but you know deep down that this specific person touched on something that the other names on that silent list never touched on. And that's exactly why this memory still bothers you, still comes back, still asks for something you can't quite name. Perhaps what she asked without knowing it wasn't for you to stay. Perhaps it was just for you to look at this hidden reserve, at this wall that has become a cage, at this ancient mechanism that decides for you before any conscious decision can be made. And there's a huge difference between looking at it with guilt and looking at it with curiosity. Guilt freezes you, makes you repeat the same cycle of retreat with an extra layer of shame on top. Curiosity opens up space. It lets you ask, without punishing yourself, what exactly was I protecting at that moment? Was it the person who threatened something real, or was it just the memory of an old wound using the face of someone who, in reality, just wanted to get closer? This question, asked honestly, changes the way you look at your entire history of relationships from now on. It doesn't bring back the person who's gone, but it gives you back something more valuable, the possibility of recognizing the pattern before it decides on its own, again in silence, without consulting you. And this recognition, however uncomfortable it may be now, is also the only real way back to intimacy. Not necessarily with this person, but with the next one, or with yourself. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign towards a life of purpose exists precisely for this moment. When Taurus recognizes the mirror and needs a practical way to overcome discomfort without retreating again out of mere reflex. It talks about how to transform this hidden reserve into a source of conscious strength, instead of a wall that pushes away even those you would most like to keep close. This type of recognition doesn't stay open like this for very long. The mind tends to close that door again quickly. The link is in the first pinned comment. In the end, maybe the answer to why you distanced yourself from that person isn't about them and never was. Maybe it's about a very old part of you that learned, too early, that safety and distance sometimes need to go hand in hand, a part that only wanted to protect what was most fertile within you, even if to do so, it had to close doors you didn't want to close. There is no blame involved. There is only an ancient mechanism, wise in its own way, that did the best it knew how with the tools it had at the time. And now that you see this mechanism more clearly, it no longer needs to operate alone in the dark, deciding for you every time someone gets too close to the land you guard so carefully. There's something profoundly beautiful about this, if you can see it from afar, without the weight of guilt hanging over you. A land that knows how to retreat in winter is not a weak land. It's a land that understands cycles, that trusts its own time to bloom again, even after seeming barren for an entire season. Taurus was never meant to bloom all the time, without stopping, without protection. It was made to alternate between surrender and retreat, between openness and rootedness. And this is not a character flaw. It's nature itself working exactly as it should. What changes from now on is not the existence of this mechanism. It will continue to be there because it's part of who you are. What changes is the relationship you have with it. Instead of being dragged along by the retreat without realizing it, you can learn to recognize the exact moment it begins to act and choose, with more awareness, whether that danger is real or just an old echo asking for attention. This small, silent choice, made repeatedly over time, is what separates a life behind closed doors from a life where security and intimacy finally manage to coexist. Perhaps the invitation in the end isn't to chase after those who have left. It might be something else. The next time you feel the retreat beginning, before running away, stop for a moment and ask yourself if it's real danger or just an old root trembling again. This pause, small, almost invisible, is the beginning of a solidity that no longer needs to hide to exist. The abundance that Taurus has always had inside, now free to stay, without needing to retreat to feel safe. And if, looking back, you recognize that this specific person deserved a conversation that never happened, or at least a silent acknowledgement that the distance was never about their worth, that in itself is a way to close this cycle with more peace than it began.